Here's my attempt at a really bad American German accent and then my best German accent. So, hallo, ich bin Amerikaner, ich bin neu hier in Deutschland und ich liebe es hier, weißt du? So that's a bad American accent. And then my best German accent's probably still not very good, but hallo, ich bin Amerikaner, ich bin neu hier in Deutschland, ich liebe es hier und ich bin dankbar hier zu sein. The trap a lot of Americans fall into is they don't realize that the whole sound is not in German at all. So we would say Amerikaner, that's how you say American, but they would say Amerikaner. In this one city I lived in, we kept running into this neo-Nazi man. I don't know if he was actually neo-Nazi or if he just was always drunk and just that was his drunk persona, but we hated it whenever we ran into him because it just felt so bad to be seen with him because he kept hiding Hitler the whole time, and what else did he do? He'd always come up to us and act like we were best friends. We're like, oh no, this guy. One time we ran into him in the bus and we're like, oh great. And he starts talking to us and then suddenly he just hands me his beer and I didn't know what to do because he just kind of handed it to me, so I took it. And so then all of a sudden there's this missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints just holding a beer in a bus, and my companion didn't really want to help me. He just wanted to kind of revel in the humor of the moment. But I didn't really know what to do with the beer, and the guy wouldn't take it back. So for the longest while, he just kept rambling, and I didn't know what to do. Eventually he took it back, but just the irony of the whole thing that I was forced to hold a beer. I mean, I could have just put my hands up and let him drop it, but then I probably would have gotten beer splashed all over me. So, as far as cultural do's or don'ts, it's always good to be punctual. Most people know that about Germans, but they really hold punctuality in a high regard. So if you're late to something, the only message that they take from it is, I don't matter to you. We had some unfortunate situations with that where we couldn't help but be late, and they just said, well, you should have planned more time in advance, which we ended up doing, just planning so much extra time in order to get places. I spent a lot of my time in Nordrhein-Westfalen, which is a really industrial part of Germany. I lived in Wuppertal, Dortmund, and Essen, which are all kind of near each other. And then I also lived in Regensburg, which is in Bayern or Bavaria. And that was a little more scenic, kind of pretty traditional German city. And then I was also in Darmstadt, which is kind of near Frankfurt. And I mentioned Wuppertal, you have to visit the Schwebebahn. There's nothing in the world like it that I know of. People come to Wuppertal just to ride it around. It's just an interesting, unique experience riding in this train car above water. And at a certain point, it goes above the street, so you can see all the cars going underneath you. And it's just kind of this rib cage frame, and it kind of hangs from it and glides along. So Schwebebahn means gliding train, and so it's kind of this smooth gliding kind of ride. That's really unique. Some things I miss about Germany are definitely the different kinds of people that I would meet. Here in Provo, I mean, I love it here in Provo, but I just don't meet the kind of people that I did in Germany. We met people who had just come from Syria and ISIS was after them. Their house had been burned down. People have been through crazy, crazy stuff. People from just all over the world. I'm sure you can get that in different parts of the U.S. too. But it was just really cool what was happening in Germany because they had found a place to go and they were being taken care of. You know, they had sort of found a better place than the place that they were in, and they needed help from people that had a good situation in Germany, and we were able to help them. And I for sure miss the food. In Germany, they don't put preservatives in anything. They don't use artificial anything. So just even the average like fruit you get in Germany is a higher quality because it's just, it's not artificial at all. And they just have good food. It's hard to describe, but just almost anything that I would buy in Germany was good. I couldn't go wrong. So, and I think if you're considering visiting Germany, it's an awesome idea. It has some of everything. It has big cities. It has small little villages. It has new stuff to visit, old stuff to visit. It has all different kinds of people, and in general, it's just a really great place to be. I mean, even if you're thinking of living there, it's a great place to live in general. lifestyle is very, very good there. So I was grateful I could be there. An interesting thing about Germany that people don't talk about much is I don't really think that they ever really came to terms with what happened in World War II. It's still a sore spot somehow. I think right after World War II, a lot of it was swept under the rug because they started reconstructing, and the world sort of looked away from all of that so that Germany could have a new start. And so sometimes it just came up because that's where we were, but I've noticed it's really not a good thing to bring up. Like, they don't like talking about it. It's kind of similar to things in America's past, where if you bring it up, then we don't want to talk about the Trail of Tears or any of the dark parts of America's history. But I think it's even more so like that in Germany, where it's sort of a slap in the face if you bring up Hitler or the Nazis or any of that stuff, just because they're trying to move on from it, and they really don't want to focus on that part of their history. My favorite little city in Germany is called Darmstadt. It's a kind of a tiny little city that doesn't get talked about much, I guess. It's right near Frankfurt, and it just has some nice little things to see and just a really good kind of vibe to it. It's not too busy, but it's also not too dead. It's kind of a cross between little German villages and then the big city feel that you get in modern German cities. Because in certain parts, there were pretty little towns that were also kind of dead. There weren't any young people there. There wasn't much going on. But in Darmstadt, it kind of has that old feel without being dead. It has 2 or 3 universities in it, and they call it Wissenschaftsstadt, which means the science city. So there's a lot going on there, but it's not so big like Frankfurt or Essen that you feel like you're just going to get trampled every day. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a tourist attraction that gets talked about a lot, but I think it's really, really kind of a fun place. I'm a little biased too because a lot of my best friends from Germany live there. My nervousness coming into Germany, I was very, 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 very nervous. I almost didn't go on a mission because I was so nervous about what life as a missionary would be like. And my first church congregation, or ward as we call it, they really just took us in. I remember their names were the Schmidts. They were like our grandparents. That's how we saw them. Every time we saw them, they just said, "We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. You're like grandsons to us, and we hope you stay a long, long time." And that just that love really, really touched me. And they would have us over for dinner all the time, and they'd be understanding of my German mistakes. And so people don't really talk about German hospitality, I think because they compare it to maybe other kinds of hospitality in other neighboring countries, but they really are very hospitable. They very kind to guests, and the people that I kind of mentioned earlier, when they do get to know someone, they really, really get to know them. They want to know their problems. They want to help them. In general, I was really struck by willingness to help in Germany, because it's kind of hard as a missionary because we were always offering help. But I noticed if we were to ask for help from anyone, just any person off the street, they'd help us immediately because that's just kind of their mindset. So people always ask me for differences between the U.S. and Germany, and I think they're just the ones that you'd expect. They speak a different language. It's Europe, so it's more populated. But what surprised me was how similar it is to America. I guess I expected just not to be able to relate to people who live on a different continent, even when I could speak the language. But that really wasn't the case, which is really interesting to me. I think the world is so connected now. When I talked to young people, their experience in life definitely had a lot of parallels to mine, especially young people in a developed country like Germany. I found that I could relate to them really, really well, and we weren't as different as I thought. People are not as different as you would think. Just because we live in different places doesn't mean that we can't connect to each other, and doesn't mean that we can't be friends. It's not as hard as it seems to get to know people. All it takes is taking an interest in their life, and usually they'll take an interest in yours. And I do think that the differences between our cultures get overestimated, especially between German and U.S. culture. Because I think ever since the Berlin Wall came down, German and U.S. cultures have been very connected. A lot of new German words come from English, and a lot of German young people love the whole idea of America and love meeting Americans, which I thought was awesome. So I knew that public transportation was a big thing in Germany, but I never knew how big a thing it was. Not only is it really extensive, but there's just a whole web of public transportation. There's buses. Sometimes in the same city, there's buses, subways, streetcars, long-distance trains, short-distance trains, everything. The first city I lived in was called Wuppertal, and it had the world's only hanging monorail. That was their public transportation. It was really cool. It's called the Schwebebahn, and that's what took you around the city, was this thing that hung from these bars, and it would just kind of glide around along the city, like above the river that went through the city. Döner is one of the best food options in Germany. I guess it's hard to describe, but people usually know what a gyro is. It's a food that was invented in Germany but has Turkish influences in it. They have this big hunk of meat roasting, and then they just slice some off. It's usually lamb or beef, and they slice them off and they put it in a sandwich, and they put all kinds of vegetables in there and some kind of sauce, and it's really good because, you know, it kind of has the balance of different foods. There are a lot of bakeries in Germany too, but when you eat a lot of bakery stuff, you start feeling kind of weighed down and gross because it's just all grains. So, but it's kind of similar to American food. So a lot of potatoes, a lot of meat. I think what's it called? Leberwurst is one of the weirdest things, where it's like spreadable meat. But I didn't have that often because I don't think Germans like it either. But it's like liver. It's liver sausage, and sometimes they have it in like a tube that you like squeeze out on bread. They're very organized, and they really respect rules. Like if there's rules, they follow them. I actually worked a job this summer because I spoke German. Worked a job at a call center, taking calls in German, and it was really interesting because we could request exceptions. You know, if something happened to someone where they need a refund, but normally they wouldn't get one, we could say, oh, we can request an exception and see if we can get you that. And usually they would just say, no, I don't need an exception. I'll just follow the rule. And that's really admirable to me, because most people would be like, oh yeah, I'm important, give me the exception. But they're very, I guess, community oriented. So it's all about, well, rules are what keep our society together, so we have to follow them. And you can see that when you go to Germany too, in German-speaking countries, because it's so clean, it's so organized, and when you talk to anybody, they have a little bit of ownership in how everything works. The train systems and the cleanliness of it all, they feel like they contribute to that by following the rules and by, you know, paying taxes, all that stuff. So straightforwardness and directness is something that I really picked up in Germany. They're not afraid to say what they feel, and because of that, they have really deep relationships with people. They don't beat around the bush. They kind of talk about Americans, how we have a lot of surface level friendships, which I found to be true in my life for sure. I have so many friendships where I would be comfortable saying hi to them, but I wouldn't ever be comfortable sharing anything personal with them. And in Germany, you know, it takes a while to beat down the wall, their kind of wall that they put up. But once you have, one of my missionary friends described it as they would take a bullet for you. Any of my friends in Germany, they'd do anything for me. That's just how they are. I had a little bit of an advantage going on a mission because I had been to Germany before, or not to Germany, but to Europe. And I remember the first time we went to Vienna, and it was a trip that my family went on. And that time there was definitely a culture shock. I didn't like how fast-paced everything was. It seemed like everybody was in a rush to get everywhere. Went to the grocery store, the person scanned all the items within 3 seconds and then just kind of shoved you out of the way and didn't even give you time to pay. And it made me really frantic all the time. But By the time I went to Germany on my mission, I was kind of used to that. And, it's annoying if you want to take it easy, but it's helpful if you're in a hurry. So if you're in a hurry, people understand, everybody's in a hurry. So that was definitely a shock. I think going to Germany, the biggest thing that shocked me was the diversity of different kinds of people. Because I had heard about the refugees coming in, but I never would have guessed how many there are and how many different languages people spoke just in the little neighborhood that we lived in. Sometimes we couldn't even find anybody that spoke German in our whole neighborhood, which I mean is another big political issue in Germany that I won't get into, but that definitely shocked me. I had no idea how diverse Germany is. Ja, ich bin so unheimlich dankbar für meine Freundschaften, die ich in Deutschland geschlossen habe. Nicht nur in Verbindung mit der Kirche, sondern auch einfach Freundschaften mit Menschen, Mensch zu Mensch. Das ist das Wichtigste, was ich da gemacht habe. Es ist natürlich wichtig, meine Religion mit Menschen zu teilen, aber manchmal wollte man das nicht und ich verstehe das. Ich bin dankbar einfach, dass man mein Freund war da in Deutschland, sowohl in meiner Kirche als auch außer der Kirche. Ich bin auch dankbar für, was in Deutschland gemacht wird für die Flüchtlinge. Das ist wirklich etwas Großes, was da gemacht wird, was vielleicht in Amerika nicht so ganz gut läuft. Und ja, ich denke, die ganze Welt ist Deutschland dankbar, dass die Flüchtlinge aufgenommen werden und dass die da eine neue Heimat gefunden haben. Und ja, ich hoffe, die Beziehungen zwischen Amerikanern und Deutschen immer besser wird. Ich hoffe, dass unsere beiden Länder nur noch bessere Freunde werden.